Hybrid publishing has become really popular in the last few years because you get some of the best aspects of both publishing and self-publishing. You pay a small amount up front to get help from the experts, and they'll get your book in front of a huge audience, but you still manage to keep the copyright yourself, which gives you some of the advantages and the royalties of self-publishing. So in this episode, we're speaking to the CEO and founder of Atmosphere Press, Nick Courtright, who is the absolute expert in this topic. And I've been asking Nick to come on the show for a while now, so I was super happy to get him to come on. He is one of the most interesting people to speak to in this world of hybrid publishing. So I think if you are interested in doing hybrid publishing or just learning a bit about how it works and some of the pros and cons, then this is the show for you. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. I'm here with Nick Courtright, who's the founder and the CEO of Atmosphere Press, which is a hybrid publishers. We're going to find out all about what that means during this show. He's also a PhD in literature, and he's the writer of 4 books, which he's published. So thank you, Nick, for joining our show.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. So hybrid publishing. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what hybrid publishing is and exactly how Atmosphere Press works within the sort of publishing world?
Yeah, so hybrid publishing is a relatively new term. It's only been around for less than a decade in sort of any sort of popular parlance, but it's definitely something where still a lot of people don't really know what it is. They don't understand it. So the way that I think it's helpful to think about it is sort of a good hybrid publisher is one that's going to try to take the best of both worlds of self-publishing and traditional publishing. So on traditional publishing, some of the best parts of it are that, you get to work with a professional team, you have a label, there's legitimacy behind it, there's selectivity, there are quality standards. The bad parts are that, they'll take your rights, you might not have a lot of control over the work. And then on self-publishing side, the best parts about that are that you keep your rights, you have more autonomy, you have more control over how the book turns out. But the bad sides are quality control issues, perceived lack of legitimacy is a possible issue, things like that. So hybrid publishing, we try to take just the good parts on each of those poles while getting rid of the bad parts on each of those poles. So at Atmosphere, authors maintain their rights to their work. They have a high level of autonomy, working through the process, but they are working with professionals throughout the journey to publish their book, getting editorial services, design services, but more in line with the author's personal aesthetic, with their personal needs, and then also sort of being able to, leverage our connections and our experience as a brand name in the publishing space.
Right. Okay. So it kind of takes some of basically takes some elements of each one to create maybe a bit more of a personalized experience for some of the writers.
Yeah, absolutely. And hybrid publishers will run the gamut, like some of them are, closer to the traditional publishing side, other ones are closer to the self-publishing side, and some of them, not all of them will let you, keep your rights, for example. Like not all of them will give you a great royalty share. Right. Some of them cost more than others because there is an author investment component to hybrid publishing. So I always just advise people to, do your research, look at what different places have. At Atmosphere, for example, we have our contract is actually publicly available on our website. I don't know anywhere else does that, but
right, okay.
We want people to be able to really look through, understand what they're getting, understand that they're getting 90% of their royalties, that they have the rights to their derivatives, and like a clear understanding of what the publisher is actually going to be doing to serve the author and their book.
Yeah, great. Because I think sometimes there is a bit of confusion when some people don't know exactly what publishers' roles are going to be and exactly what the responsibilities for the writer and also the publisher are. So that's great that it's so transparent. What was it that actually inspired you to start Atmosphere Press? Because we'll come into some of the more details about exactly the difference between hybrid and versus regular publishing or even self-publishing later. But what was it that made you want to start Atmosphere Press in the first place? And what was your vision for it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I could try to concoct some sort of story about how I'm like an entrepreneur who had a bolt of lightning sort of thought, but really I was just a college English professor. I was teaching creative writing, I was teaching literature, I was teaching a bunch of horrible, freshman composition classes. But I did a little bit of writing coaching on the side. This was back in 2013, 2014. And I was doing writing coaching, helping authors with their books. And then in 2015, I had an author who, he wanted help publishing his book.
Yep.
And I was like, I had some small press experience just from, having been a published author myself. And I thought, oh, well, I'll help him publish his book. He didn't want to self-publish. He didn't want to, wait years and years and years to potentially be able to have a traditional publisher. So his book was about the universe and the meaning of life. So I started thinking of press names. And I was like, oh, Cosmos Books. And it's like, no, that's too dorky. And, thought about various possible press names to put this book out, and then boom, Atmosphere Press popped into mind. The domain name was available, and that became the first Atmosphere Press book. And then after that, another author needed help, and then another, and then another, and then another, and now here we are, 9 years later, and we've published about 1,200 books.
Oh my God. Wow.
So it's crazy how, there wasn't necessarily a big sort of vision. It just kind of happened. But one thing that I knew from the start, from the first time I actually, bought that domain name and put a website up there, is that Atmosphere was going to be dedicated to, honesty, transparency, kindness, professionalism. Like author rights was going to be really, really forward in it, because at that time, like, nobody really knew what hybrid publishing was, but people knew that a lot of times traditional publishing wasn't very beneficial for author rights. And I knew that we wanted to be in opposition to that. So yeah, right from the beginning, I knew that much, but all the rest of it sort of came over the course of years as ultimately I left academia and left teaching and sort of went all in on this and started trying to build a team that matched those values. And now here we are.
Yeah. So the gap in the market you saw wasn't really around necessarily a completely new idea. It was more about improving what was there and being really transparent with people about how they can, publish their books and make sure that it's they know exactly what they're getting into before they start.
Yeah, and like I was honestly like I was surprised that there was a market. Like I didn't like know that. Like I had no sort of like, oh, I see a gap in the market, we're going to try to fill it. I mean, I was doing literary analysis, in my
Yeah.
PhD and stuff. So that was not on my radar at all. But then once I started putting this out there, it became like very clear that there was a market and that it wasn't, self-publishing. It wasn't people who just wanted to self-publish. It was people who wanted to work with professionals. They wanted a unified team. They wanted, everybody to be sort of pulling on the same side of the rope, and having sort of some of those benefits of traditional publishing, but they still wanted to keep control. And, once I started putting it out there, people started finding us. And, I guess the market was there all along, and I
Yeah.
just sort of had to wander into it.
So most of your authors, is it mostly their first time book, or are most of them coming back for maybe their second book?
We have a lot of repeat authors who work with us for multiple books. Like that's a big thing that we're super proud of, is that we sort of view ourselves as a lifetime partner.
Right.
Even if we only publish one book, it's like once you publish a book with a publisher, if it's a good relationship, like, a book lasts forever, ideally, right? And we do work with a lot of repeating authors, and we do work with a lot of authors who have published before, both people
Okay.
who self-published before and they found the experience to be a little hollow, because you're all alone.
Yeah.
Whereas with us, we try to foster community, or people who had published previously. We published a lot of people who had, big time, academic publications at places like Rutledge and Oxford. We've published authors who have published with, HarperCollins and Penguin Random House in the past, and they wanted a publishing experience where they weren't just part of a corporate machine, where they were going to be more involved in it. So, and then of course, lots of people who this is their first book, this is their pride and joy that they've been working on for years, and they come to us to help see it through.
Yeah. Definitely. So are there like any particular types of books that you usually want to have at Atmosphere Press? And by that I mean, like, are there particular uh, types, particular categories, or any particular niches that you want to get into your into Atmosphere?
What are the new rules for business? Listen to Challenger X to find out.
You publicly talk about how much you've exited for.
This makes sense, okay? So people don't talk about this. I don't understand why
Right.
people don't talk about it. Just tell them the damn number,
Yeah.
right? It's not like, I mean, so I say I sold my company for 56 million. That's not how much money I got in my bank account, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of other calculations that go on after that. So just tell the number because it's useful for other entrepreneurs to know. Most companies exit around $30 million, right? I talk to people all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, if I can't get $1 billion exit, I don't know why I'm bothering doing that. Most companies exit for 30 million. You should know that kind of data.
Like what you hear? Listen to Challenger X for more.
Yeah, so typically, we do publish pretty widely. So we don't have like, oh, this is the only genre that we serve, right?
Yeah.
So we do publish a lot of memoir. We publish a lot of fiction, like a lot of novels. My background is as a poet. Several of the other, key members of our team have backgrounds in poetry. So we're very
Wow.
like literary. We like the literary, sort of angle of things. So we do some, like your business self-help kind of book. But that's more of a minority. We're sort of like more in on, things that are going to sort of push the envelope in a literary kind of way. We do a good number of children's books also, and those tend to, be among the best sellers. So yeah, in terms of, the types of books that we're looking for, it's less about the type of book that we're looking for and more about the type of author who we're
Yeah.
looking for. Because we want somebody who's, going to sort of have the right spirit to engage in a collaborative relationship.
Yeah, because you are quite selective, I think, about the people you take on. You don't just take on everyone; you make people go through a process. So, what are
Yeah,
those?
absolutely.
Yeah, what is that acceptance criteria? Do you and what would people need to do in order to make sure they had the best chance of being successful with you?
Yeah, so we do have acceptance standards. Like we're not a vanity press, we're not a self-publishing place where it's like, oh, come one, come all, we'll just like throw your book out there. Like every book that we work on says Atmosphere Press on it, right? So
Yeah,
we do have a rather clear cut, like 4 questions that we have to ask ourselves when investigating whether a book is going to be a good partner for us. So 2 of those questions, the answer must be yes. And those 2 questions are, will this be a mutually beneficial relationship? Like, are both sides, the author and the team, going to benefit from this relationship and enjoy working with each other?
yeah,
Because that's very important. And then the other one that must be yes is, will our process be a good fit for the book? Right? If it's something where it's like this book is going to need things that we're not really able to provide, like we don't want to, sign that book on. It's not going to be a good fit for us. We don't want to disappoint the author, right? And then we have a couple questions where the answer must be no. And that's whether the book will cause harm to readers or whether the book will cause harm to Atmosphere Press. So we don't want
right.
to publish things that, are hateful, misogynistic, sexist. And we also, of course, whether it's going to cause harm to the press as a whole, does take into account the larger, broader question of quality, right?
Yeah,
So if the book is super poorly written, like we can't publish it because we do publish people who have very high profiles, and we can't like damage the brand name and therefore damage their reputation. So all of those things sort of seek to, raise the game on, the types of books that we're willing to work with while also not being, super unduly exclusionary. Like we don't want to be like a traditional press where they look down on authors, right? Where
yeah.
they're like, we get 10,000 submissions and we take 2, and it's only if you have, 1 million followers on Instagram. Like, that's not who we are, right? Like, we
Okay.
want to be of service to the writing community. So there is sort of a give and take there. But I think that, having those standards in place, makes a big difference in keeping quality up and making sure that we're working with the right types of folks and that those folks are getting the most out of the relationship with us.
Yeah. Nice. Now, with the actual application process, is it very similar to a proposal to one of the normal publishing houses, or do you have a different approach that you take when accepting manuscripts?
Yeah, it's quite similar. One of the differences is that rather than just asking for a query, we usually appreciate having a full manuscript,
Okay.
because we get a lot of submissions from people who have only written like a very small amount, right?
When you say
Like
query, sorry, what do you mean?
like they'll just be like, send us a sample, send us
Right.
like a cover letter in like a 10-page sample or like a
Yeah, got it.
5-page sample, or send us like the first 3 pages. Like we're more likely, we want to see the whole thing, right? Because a proposal doesn't really do us a heck of a lot of good. Like
Yeah.
our process relies on, the author actually being a writer, right? Like not just
Right.
somebody with an idea, but somebody who's, put the time in to actually write the book. But otherwise, yeah, you don't need an agent, right? You could just go to atmospherepress.com and we just have right there, like, submit your manuscript if you would like it to be considered by us. And
Yeah.
unlike, many agents or traditional publishers, we will not take 6 months or a year to respond. We
Yeah.
try to really prioritize response, just in part of the whole theme of author rights and benefiting authors. We want to be responsive. We want to let people know whether they're going to be a good fit for us. So if somebody makes it through initial review, then we ask them some more questions about what they want, what they need, like the history of the project, more about it. And then if it sort of passes that stage, then we invite them to have a phone call with one of our acquisitions editors. And then it's just a collaborative conversation, sort of discussing whether it's going to be a good fit, what it would be like, answering the author's questions, and sort of taking it from there. And one thing, if it's not a great fit for the author, we are going to try to help that author find what is a great fit for them. Because we do want to be of service to writers, even if their destiny isn't ultimately to work with us.
Yeah. No, of course. That is really interesting because a lot of people are just very cutthroat and just say no, don't even respond to the email. Sometimes, it's just, that's just not going to happen. So it's great to get that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Just before the call, we were talking about advertising, and it's one of the services that you actually provide for the authors that are under Atmosphere Press. So if you're doing hybrid, what services would you be doing? And can some of the authors maybe pick and choose parts of the services you provide, or is it a case of here's my package, you kind of take that on or you don't take it on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have 3 main packages that we offer authors. And one of the biggest distinguishing features between the 3 packages is the amount of publicity support, right? So
Right.
sort of, a lot of hybrid publishers actually don't do much publicity at all. Like they're just publishing the book. They're putting the book out in the world and that's all they're doing, right?
Right.
But with us, throughout the journey, like we do editorial meetings, we do all the design, we like work through all of this with you. And right from the moment somebody signs on with us, we're doing publicity coaching. Like literally one of the first emails that an author gets from us is like, hey, you might not want to think about promotions yet, but here are some things to think about, right?
Oh, okay,
To
that's
try
interesting.
to help them, try to set up a mailing list and like, build a profile, sort of brew up some anticipation. And then when the book is ultimately out, like there's a whole suite of things that we can do, from like paid advertising for the author, like landing them interviews and podcasts, getting them professional objective reviews for their book, yeah, doing award submissions for the book. That's another like big piece of things. Hosting readings for the author. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can do because we are a press that is different than a self-published author where they're sort of a lone ranger out in the world trying to figure this out on their own.
Right. Yeah, because that's good, because when a lot of authors who are maybe doing it for themselves, you've got to do all of those different parts yourself, obviously. You've got to do your own advertising, your own PR, building your brand. I was speaking to Isabel Knight a few weeks ago about building your brand online. It was a really interesting chat because a lot of authors just think they have these books written and they can kind of just hope for those sales to come in, and it's really not going to happen. But with a lot of publishers, they don't really help the authors with that side of it. They kind of take it on and then don't necessarily do that extra work to help the coaching. So especially like with their public coaching and how they're perceived and their brands online. So is that something you do a lot of that coaching and helping them to improve their online presence?
Yeah, and that's something that, we do take a lot of pride in. We think it's a big differentiator for us because, like I mentioned, like a lot of hybrid presses and a lot of traditional presses don't really do that. Like when you sign on with a traditional press, a lot of times they're going to be like, who are you hiring as your publicist? Right? Like they're not doing it for you. And for years, like we at Atmosphere didn't really touch the publicity side. We were just a publisher, right? So from 2015 until like 2020, 2021, like we didn't really do a lot of the promotional side of things. And then we started, you know, having it sort of as a side thing where it's like you publish with us and then you can get additional publicity support if you want. And now it's just really like baked into the whole process with us. And that's something that we're very proud of because we do, want authors to have success out in the world, like as authors. And they're going to, of course, be more likely to continue working with us, to send us referrals, to if they're going to be successful and like feeling great about their experience as an author. Because the last thing we want is the book's just published and then it's crickets, right?
Yeah.
We want them to be able to reap the dividends of being an author.
Right. Okay. So once I submit a manuscript to you and it's like you accept it, what would be the next steps? What would be the work you'd be doing, and what would be the work you'd be expected from me?
Yeah, so right from the get-go, we're going to match you up with a developmental editor. So
Okay.
that's another thing that we do that a lot of presses, both traditional, hybrid, and most self-publishing firms do not do. We match you up with a developmental editor who's going to like go through the book with you, have multiple meetings with you, talking through it, trying to make sure you're refining the end, that your characters are developed, that the big picture of it is really coming together, that the structure is working, that you've got the right title on it. And while that's happening, we'll also match you up with our art director who, will like our cover design, like that's something that we're really proud of because we have like very, very talented team of cover designers. And we also really, really work hard to try to come up with something that's going to work with the author's personal aesthetic because we
Right.
really believe that the author should love the cover of their book. So we ask the author a lot of questions, including having them send over book covers that they really like, because that helps us sort of become attuned to what the author is going to be drawn to visually themselves. So we try to find like what is going to be professional, what's going to like work really well as a cover for a marketplace while also being aligned with what the author wants. And then from there, proofreading, interior layout and design, which is always like much more complicated than authors think it will be.
Yeah.
And then, of course, onwards towards, getting the proof copy of the book and into, publicity strategizing and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. And what would you expect from me as an author once we sort of agreed to start working together?
Yeah, I mean, participation,
Yep.
right? Like it's not a thing where, you're just sort of like, okay, I signed up, here's my book, like now make it happen. It's like it doesn't work like that. Like you
Yeah.
need to show up to the editorial meetings. Like you need to send in the book covers that you like. Like we'll give you some samples, we'll give you places to choose book covers from. We're going to help you through this, but you need to participate. It is a collaborative relationship. And that's the way that you're going to get the book that you really want, is by participating in this process, like working through it step by step. And it is a relationship that you need to embark on. And that's one reason why with a lot of our authors, we do become very close to them. Like we know what their children's names are. Right? We know when their birthday is. Like we know how freaked out they are when their book is about to be published. Right. So it is, a thing where, both sides are engaging in a marriage of sorts.
Yeah. Oh, that's very good. Is there any difference between the way it works with fiction or non-fiction, or is it exactly the same process?
It's pretty much the same process. There's no huge distinction between, fiction or nonfiction. The biggest one, of course, is just the editor that we're going to match you up with.
Right.
Because we do have developmental editors who are set for, oh, this is our developmental editor who does memoir. This is our developmental editor who's really great with sci-fi and fantasy. This is our developmental editor who is, going to be great with poetry. This is the one who we send our, business books or our self-help books to. So those experiences can be, quite different. And then obviously like the design requirements for a novel often are rather, relaxed compared to a nonfiction book where there might be like a chapter and then a heading and then a subheading and then a sidebar and then a pull quote and then there's pictures and there's charts. So like that can, definitely get pretty crazy on the nonfiction side. But really like for the most part, it's a rather like similar steps, but we just sort of cater it to the book's particular needs.
Yeah. And are there any particular authors you've worked with, or any particular success stories that you think this really shows off exactly what we do really well?
Yeah, I think there are definitely some big wins out there. So we have a children's book author, Dennis Matthew, who's published multiple books with us. He's sold more than 100,000 copies.
Wow.
So he's like out there. He's doing readings at schools. He's probably at a school reading a book in front of a room full of students right now. So he does a lot of that. So that's been something that's been great. We have an author.
Sorry, just on that point, with that author, would you help him with the illustrations and things like that as well, or is that something he would also bring to the table?
Yeah, we actually do have illustrators who we have sort of partnerships with.
Yeah.
So we've got a list of I think about a dozen illustrators who we've worked with, who we like officially approve and we know do good work. So we work with a good number of children's books authors who, they come with their own illustrator. They've illustrated it themselves. Like we're able to accommodate that. But then ones, if they need help, like getting an illustrator, we have ones that we can like have them choose from. So yeah, because that obviously for a children's book is a pretty, monumental part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And so you were just sharing some other of the case studies as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another one is we actually, published a book called Southern Gay Teacher, which was by an author named Randy Fair, who he had been, a homosexual teaching in the South for years, right? And he wrote a memoir about this experience. And he had been shopping this thing. Like this is the type of story that I love, is that he had been trying to get this book out there for a long time. He had just gotten no bites on it. It's insane, because if a traditional publisher like doesn't think that there's a market, or there's some issue with the book or you don't have a huge following, like they're just going to reject you outright. So one of the issues with this book when it came to us is it was too long. It was like 600 pages long or something.
Right. Okay.
So like we helped him through editorial, trim the book down. And then when the book came out, it was kind of a small sensation, like he, started doing speaking events at like big conferences, sort of became like a trusted voice in that community and in the larger like educational world as to like how to navigate this in a hostile environment. So that was another one that was one that we're really proud of. Then there's Terry Brown, who's publisher who writes historical fiction. We're currently right now working on our third book with her.
Yeah.
And both of her previous books have won just a bajillion different awards and like received like starred reviews, gotten a lot of recognition. And really that's just the beginning. There are like, countless stories of, authors going on book tours, like readings, selling books, making connections, and because the one thing is that being a successful author isn't just about book sales. It's also about lifestyle, right? Like, are you leveraging this to get promotions at work, to have doors open for you, to make connections, to make friendships, to enhance your profile as a human being? And we've got lots and lots of cases of success along those lines.
Great. I'll put links to all those books in the show notes. So if you want to read any of those books, you can just click on the show notes, then there'll be a link to them down there. Now, with sorry, just give me a second. Oh yeah, sorry. That I just lost my place a bit there. Sorry, that's it. So with all that we talked about just today, what advice would you give to authors who are considering submitting their manuscript to Atmosphere Press? Are there any ways of making their manuscript stand out, for example? Are there any things you'd expect to see, or what would increase a person's chances of getting success in order when they're submitting their manuscript?
Yeah, I think one thing is, have a cover letter in there. Like, the more information that you can give us, the better. Obviously, if your, manuscript is more publish worthy, it's have you tried proofreading it, like things like that, like really make a big difference. Also, right at the top of your cover letter, like, put that you heard about Atmosphere on this podcast. That always really helps.
Okay.
Helps one stand out, because we know, sort of that have some education about what we do, like, coming into the potential relationship. Because we do get a lot of submissions. We get about 1,400 submissions a month,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
That's a lot. So, and a lot of them come from people who, they don't really know what's going on, right? Like, they maybe just like Googled like places to submit my manuscript, and then they just like shot out like 100 of these, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, um, any time anyone can come in, and they're more of a referral, that just gives us, we just know that we're starting on steadier footing. So those are things definitely that help. And then, if you make it through those sort of first rounds, go into the phone call with one of our acquisitions folks, ready to ask questions, get answers, review things, and, we can have an earnest conversation and see if it's a good fit for both sides.
Great. And do you think an author should be clear with you exactly what they want to get out of their career as well?
Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful. I mean, if somebody is just like, I need to be a New York Times bestseller and I need to be on Oprah. I mean, when we see people say things like that, we're like, good luck, buddy. It's hard, like, selling books is not easy, so but yeah, definitely, if you're like, I want my book to be like treated well, I want to have like a good experience with this, like, I learned about your team, like, we have everybody on our team is like listed on our website. That's another thing. Like, go to many presses, you will not see a mascot. You will not see the people who you're actually going to be working with,
Yeah.
so on our website, we have all of that. You can really connect as a human being to the people on our team. So yeah, if that's something that interests you, we would love to have a conversation.
Great. Yeah, I did actually notice that when I was preparing for the interview. I was looking at your website and I was thinking, oh God, I can see everyone's names. I can see exactly what they do in their job descriptions. It was really great. So I felt that really transparent. It feels like your whole website is really transparent. So that is really good. Are there any particular trends in writing at the moment you're looking for? Like, for example, are there any particular niches or categories of books that you'd really like to see more of at Atmosphere?
I wouldn't say like niches necessarily, or like trends. I mean, we always really love work that has some kind of experimental aspect to it.
Okay.
In large part, the reason why I'm saying that's like, we love publishing, like, straight up genre fiction. You wrote a mystery novel, like, we love it. We want to see it, right? You wrote a
Yeah.
fantasy, we want to see it, right? But we do love to see stuff that is like challenging, that's experimental, that's like doing some risky stuff, because those types of projects are just rare. And because we do have a lot of like literary folks on the team, If you wrote a book where you're like, man, this is going to be like practically impossible to place anywhere else because it's like taking like 7 different genres and mixing them together, like that's the type of thing that we want to see for sure.
Great. So if you're a bit more arty, maybe you'd be a good person to get in touch with. And
yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. I think that's really given people a really good overview of like exactly how hybrid publishing works and the difference between that and self-publishing and the best things that people can do if they want to have the best chance of, being taken on by you guys. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. No
just
problem.
the final question before we go. So, but actually, before we get to that question, if people want to get in touch with Atmosphere or get in touch with you specifically, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, so definitely go to atmospherepress.com. As I mentioned, you can submit a manuscript there, but then we also have a lot of other resources. Like we have a huge article database full of articles and blog posts that have advice for authors. We run an author interview series. We run a writing residency in Costa Rica that does not cost any money to attend beyond your travel. So that's like a competitive thing that people can apply to. We also have free book giveaway on our website where you can get one of our books for free potentially. And another cool tool that we have on there is we have a publishing potential quiz. Where you can go on there and just take this short quiz, just 10 questions, just asking about your project, what you want. And based on your answers, we will give you sort of, bespoke feedback and advice specifically on, what might be good next steps for you. It might be like, hey, you should, potentially consider like a partnership with Atmosphere. It might be like, hey, self-publishing would be a good choice for you, or like you should seek an agent. Or if you're an earlier stage project, we might give you feedback on, how to generate content. So that's something that's just on there that you can just, check out. So like I sort of mentioned at the top of the call is that we do want to be a resource for all sorts of writers, like even the ones that we aren't publishing. So that's something that's important to us.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate your time today. That's all really helpful. And some of that extra training on your website is really good. I've read quite a few of your articles now and I've really enjoyed all of them. So definitely check that out. And if you do get in touch with Atmosphere, just mention you heard on the podcast, as Nick said. That should help you out a bit. So the final question is, what book do you recommend that everyone should be reading that maybe is a bit, not everyone is reading, they should be at the moment?
Yeah, so I have a special recommendation. It's a book of poetry, because I think that everybody should be reading poetry. Just because, it's great. It's bite size, like you can read just one little bit at a time. It doesn't require a huge amount of time. You can take like a single book of poetry and you can take 3 years to read it, and that's fine. So the one that I want to recommend, it has a humorous title, How to Monetize Despair is the name of the title, the name of the book, and it's by Lisa Matolo. She's a really amazing poet. This is her first book out there, and yeah, it's a book that deals with trauma, deals with tragedy. It has humor in it. It has sadness in it, but it's a really great example of the craft, and I think it's something that everybody should check out.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Nick. It's been really great chatting to you today. Thank you, and we'll speak again soon.
All right, have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1.